Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi.
For one of our most special episodes yet. I fired Donovan. I fired Mango. They weren't making me enough money. And I brought in this celestial being from the gods, my favorite artist,
Aww.
the stunning Raveena. Welcome to the void.
Hi.
We've brought you here today to talk about quite a few things, namely your new album and music as a construct, as an art form, as a form of therapy, as a spiritual practice, and also your own spiritual practice. We've been talking a lot lately on this channel about spirituality, about the gods, about why we're here. We've been spiraling. And
I
so,
also want to say it's my favorite podcast.
oh, thank you, because you're my favorite singer.
It just works.
It just works out. For context, I discovered Raveena on SoundCloud. We met on SoundCloud
7 years ago.
7 years ago, and I'm still her number one fan. And so I thought it was only
And
right.
now we're friends.
And now we're friends. I thought it was only right to drag you here to sort of talk about your new album, but also just your music as a whole.
I'm excited to
So,
dive in.
yeah. I've listened to your album and it's giving maturity. She's a grown woman. You know, she's a healed woman. She's a grown woman. She's growing into her own. It's very honest.
Aww.
Yeah, where were you taking us with the album? What was the idea behind it? What were you trying to express? Because if I were to describe what your album feels like, it feels like a caterpillar growing into a butterfly.
I feel like in the most simplistic sense, it's taking us to a very sunlit room.
Ooh, explain.
It's really intimate, but it has this sense of expansion because of the nature around it and like feeding that room.
Yeah. It also feels very live.
It's like, really live.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my music's always been pretty live, but this one is especially really live.
Yeah. Is there a reason behind that? Are you feeling too digitized at the moment?
I think my goal in this album, and it didn't start off as my initial intention, but just what it came to be was that I wanted to start relying on my most natural instincts as a musician. And like really feed into like whatever that looked like in the moment.
Yeah.
And for me, I really had my foundation in jazz and soul, and that was what I grew up singing for almost 10 years and training in.
Yeah.
So I found myself just going back to those really natural instincts, and live music is also, you know, a big home base for me.
Yeah.
And such a big part of my musicianship.
Yeah.
And also like we approach all the albums like a band more than like a solo singer.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just about like following natural instinct instead of trying to fit into my idea of like what's the best.
Yeah.
You know?
Or what you're supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly.
I did want to talk to you about that. Just the art of balancing what you're supposed to be as a musician versus who you actually are.
Are we going in this deep so soon?
We're getting deep. Yeah. How do you balance, or like how do you reconcile like being a musician in an industry that is commodified in like a hyper-capitalist country, but also like still maintaining your integrity as a person and like even beyond as a person, like as a spiritual being, like as a ray of light? Like how do you balance that?
I love that. Partly dissociation.
I love it. Delusion.
Delusion. No.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's probably why I spend so much time in the ether and like the spirit realm.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think for a couple years when I first started, my heart got really broken as a musician, and I just went through so much.
Yeah.
On the industry side and like personal relationship side.
Yeah.
And the money side. So, and that's part of everyone's growing up, is like you have this kind of fantasy of what something looks like, and then it shatters.
Yeah.
And then you find yourself again.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of what this album depicts in a way, like that process of
dying.
Of dying, but like
yes, this is an episode about death.
But it depicts that process of getting older and getting softer. Like you've been through so much that you just want to hide in your flower. Like that's what butterflies do when it's raining. Like that was the genesis of the album. I had a really hard year. Yeah. And I was going through a lot, specifically like in the music industry. And I realized that I just needed to be that like butterfly. Like I needed to recognize that I was this very soft being that needed to be protected. And butterflies go in flowers and leaves when it's raining because their wings are too delicate to fly.
Oh my God, in the rain.
So that's what the album means. Yeah. It's like, I think as we grow older, we've been through such immense amount of shit. And it's like seeped into our bodies. And the only choice is to be softer and kinder. Yeah. Otherwise you just end up this really bitter person, which I don't really see for myself.
I want to go back to what you said in the beginning, when I asked you sort of how do you reconcile and balance the hardening nature of the world with the intentional softening of your heart. And you said that it's why you spend so much time in the ether. Yeah. Take us into the ether, bitch. Where is the ether? How did you find it? That's really what I want to know.
Ooh, how did
you find the ether? Did someone tell you about it? Did you stumble upon it during hard times?
I feel like I've been called into the ether since I was a child. I had a very spacey, very spiritual family. Oh. Because it's kind of funny because you grow up very traditional and like in a religious home. Yeah. Right? Like I grew up in a very conservative, traditional Sikh home. Yeah. And there was a lot of rules set in place. But kind of what all the white hippies are practicing now, like Reiki and yoga and like Indian spirituality. This was just common.
Yeah, you just grew up with it.
Yeah, it was just common knowledge to communicate with spirits and to communicate with the ether and chant, and this was just like constant in my home. Wow. Yeah, so I think I was introduced at a very early age, but I think it took like kind of developing my own practice with it and almost distancing myself from the really like more intense parts of like religion. Yeah. Into just like the more fairy-like and like elevated parts of spirituality.
Right.
But yeah, I think 2021 was the first year I started really meditating like every single day. And that just made a huge impact. And I started with like 5 to 10 minutes a day. Yeah. But I made sure that it was every single morning. Wow. And sometimes I'd have days where I'd just like go into the mountain and just kind of be in a constant meditation. Yeah. And that just like led me to start hearing like messages in the mountain. Wow. And it led me to just start following like little inklings of intuition. Yeah. And just an awareness that, aliens and spirits are always in communication with us. And it's just about quieting our mind enough to hear them, because they're always in communication. It's actually very easy to hear them. They're quite loud.
Okay, first I want to take a step back. I'm interested. What is the ether? Is it a tangible space, or is it a state of being, a state of consciousness?
So how I've come to know of what the ether is through a lot of like time in that space and a lot of time in meditation. And I think I really started getting an understanding of it when I started doing Vipassana, which is hours and hours of meditation and silence for days at a time. And you just kind of just start slipping in that place and getting a lot of information about what it looks like. So what I've garnered and what I've actually like cross-referenced with other texts that I've read later is that, to me, we have the third dimensional body, right? Yeah. Well, even lower than that, we have like the internet dimension, which is like the most flattening space. And I think why so many artists struggle is because we're pulling from like
really high
such a high dimension and trying to like flatten everything into just
this one-dimensional space.
Yeah. So there's 3D, which is your body, like your physical body.
Yeah.
Then there's the fourth dimension, which I understand as, you know, just senses. There's the fifth dimension where there's no sense of time and space. So it's kind of like vertical and horizontal at once. There's the sixth dimension, which I view as this like really soft film around your body, and it's kind of like your higher consciousness. The seventh dimension, I think, is where things get interesting, and it's like your ancestors, certain guides in your life that are trying to communicate to you. Yeah. I see the eighth dimension as like disciples. Like in Sikhism, there's like Guru Nanak, or like in Christianity, there's Jesus. I would even put maybe aliens in this realm. Yeah. Like good aliens.
Oh, okay.
I see the ninth dimension as celestial bodies.
What is a celestial body?
Like the sun and stars and clouds and, you know, things in that realm. Yeah. And then I see the 10th and above as like God and kind of the spirit that all of these forces are pulling from. So you're just like getting a trickle down from any dimension you access. You're just getting from that same source.
Do you see all of the different layers? Or do you go like layer by layer? Oh, wow.
Yeah, I can see all the different layers.
Yeah.
It's less seeing, more feeling.
Okay.
But sometimes there are very clear pictures, you know, in like certain really deep states of channeling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think once you come to know the very real presence of those things, it's very hard to go back to just living in a way with
in Plato's cave.
In Plato's cave. Yeah, just living in a way of like not being very aware or like being very in tune with your emotions. Yeah. And that's not to say I don't get really stressed or like, you know, like you saw me, like I was sitting in this beautiful garden and like really stressed about this eBay order. And I think like the beautiful part about this shit is that like you come to realize that actually we came for the experience of annoyance and irritation and anger and sadness. Yeah. We came for that like contrasting and fullness of that experience. Yeah. Because if we just existed in the ether with all these like floating celestial bodies, that's all we would be. We'd just be like pure love. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And we are that. We are that essentially to the core, but we came here to like experience the fullness.
Yeah. So that we could know pure love. Or why do you think we need to experience the fullness of the human experience?
Sometimes I think it's just to fuck around and have fun and like have an interesting time.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I think it's maybe because some beings on this earth are just very earthy and like very, very grounded to this kind of space and reality. And the people that can communicate have come to just send that kind of message.
I really like what you said, because I think this is a very important disclaimer that even though you've come to know the ether and you've come to like be aware of like the truth beyond what this reality is.
Yeah, and maybe it's just my truth, you know?
Yeah.
It's not everybody's.
But I think there's this idea that to know that truth is to like permanently exist in that truth.
Yeah, or to be absolved or something.
Yeah.
From like human suffering.
Like, exactly.
Or mistake.
Yes,
or,
you know?
Or being, you know, just
a person.
Just a person.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons that people pursue the spiritual path, and I want to now talk about the spiritual path.
Whoa.
I think one of the reasons that people pursue the spiritual path is because they want to completely transcend human suffering. And they like view the spiritual path as this gateway to never suffering again. Never being sad again, never being bothered by anything again, never being mad again, or like...
I know I've done that.
You know? Yeah, I think that's how we all in the beginning were like drawn in the very beginning to the spiritual path by this promise of permanent happiness.
Yeah.
Of, you know, by this like sort of illusory promise of like permanent enlightenment and happiness. And I like what... The ducks have some shit to say. The ducks have some shit to say. Talk your shit. They're done.
Oh my God.
They heard us talking and were like, we need to chime in on this.
The ducks are really chiming in.
They're chiming in. I think they have some things to say.
That was hilarious.
They chime in a lot on this podcast. The ducks and the birds. They but I really like that you said that like this doesn't mean that I no longer suffer or that I no longer like sit on the phone with eBay customer support. So I want to know from you, you seem to have really found peace with the fact that suffering is part and parcel of being a human being. And just because like that's so part of the human experience, that doesn't mean pursuing the spiritual path or like pursuing knowledge isn't worth it. So what is your reason? Like, why not just be a 3-dimensional material person who lives to order shit on Amazon and accumulate as much money as possible and be on the hedonistic treadmill? Like, why bother pursuing this spiritual path?
You know, it's funny when you asked that question, I just got this image of this one night when I was dancing and practicing.
Yeah.
And I do this thing where I kind of try to engage with all of my disciplines when I'm working daily and practice them. But there was this one night where I just got so deep in dancing, and I just like had to go sit in my room and like meditate after. Yeah. Because the flow was so intense, and it felt like at that moment art had met spirit, had met music, had met like, it was just like the conjoining of all these things that I love. Yeah. And I think that's why I do it, because that feeling when you tap into that flow with music or with like spirit, it's very euphoric and very maybe almost a little addicting. Yeah. But it's just like the most right feeling in the world. That's all I can describe it as. It just feels right, and it feels like where I want to be all the time. And when I'm not there, I miss it. Kind of like a lover that you miss. You know? So it's home. Yeah, it's like home. It's like the ultimate home. It's the ultimate home. And it's, I think, where we go when we die. I was literally going to ask you, is this where we go when we die? I think so. Probably a sense of like deep completion and flow with spirit.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that's why we come as earthly beings.
Yeah.
Because we can like dance, or we can sing, or we can write a song, or we can make a movie, or like make a freaking podcast and channel.
Yeah.
And that's so fun because there's so much texture and like different color and different shapes to the expression. And I think humans love delighting in that. You know?
Yeah. Do we love suffering? Or do we need suffering?
Yeah, we probably love suffering a bit.
Yeah, I hear that. What is music in the context of your spiritual practice? Is it a way to keep your heart soft? Is it a portal to access the ether and the awareness? Or is it more of like a discipline to keep you on track? Why do you like create music?
I would say it's all three, but I would say it's mostly a portal.
Oh, explain.
No, because I'm just thinking about like my life if I hadn't had music.
Yeah.
And how deranged it would have been without it.
Yeah. Like, deranged is a funny word. Yeah.
It would have been deranged without it.
Yeah.
That's all I can say.
You'd be unhinged without music.
I'd be unhinged.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know myself. No, maybe I'd find myself in other ways. I hope I would.
I think you would.
I think I would. But as I know it now, if I didn't have music in certain fucked periods of my life, like I would have been an entirely different person.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would have gotten out of it.
Where do your songs come from?
I think with this album especially, my goal was to have them just come from spirit as much as possible. And I think that, I always think about this, like I think that all music pulls from the same source.
Ooh.
But it's just, you know, it's like how grainy the conduit is.
Yeah.
Like for some musicians, it's a bit grainier than others, and you can hear the grain.
What does grain mean?
Like probably just like closeness to the ground, or like closeness to like shit where it's murky.
Yeah.
So I tried to be as clear of a channel as possible.
Yeah.
And there's some grain in there. I'm not going to say there isn't some grain. Yeah. But I tried to make sure that with this album especially, it was just like why every song got placed on this album is because there was this indescribable magic and like ease to the way that the song came about.
Oh.
Because we wrote like over 100 songs for this album.
Yeah.
And I rewrote it like 19 times.
Yeah.
Like
wow.
It was a very psychotic process.
Yeah.
I think people don't know that I'm like, I used to be completely mentally ill, but now I'm just mentally ill about the art.
Okay.
And I'm still
I like that progression. That's progress.
No, you know what I mean though?
Yeah, no, I get you.
Yeah, now I still have like crazy standards because I don't want anything to be grainy. It's a blessing and a curse to be in love with like practicing music and learning more about it.
Yeah.
Because you, on one hand, get to experience like your hands and your timing and your flow with instruments and with your voice become just like at ease, you know, more at ease every day.
Yeah.
But then it's also hard because you look at yourself from like maybe a year before and you look at maybe the kind of songs you were writing or where your voice was and you're like, oh my God, I improved so much. Like, how can I put out this thing that isn't reflective of like currently where I am?
Right.
But everyone around me keeps telling me to accept that an album is just like a picture in time. And it doesn't have to be like the kind of magnum opus. Like my friend Mara was telling me, like maybe the term magnum opus is a bit toxic and a bit like rooted in capitalism.
Yeah.
Because it's like you have to create the greatest body of work of your life every time. And it has to be better every time. And it has to sell better every time.
Yeah.
People have to like it more and larger quantities every time, which is just not in flow with life. Something that I've been thinking about a lot is how I can tune my body in more with the season.
Ooh, talk to me more about that.
Like in the winter, I just accept that it's not the time to ask for tons of money, and it's not the time to ask for a wealth of abundance coming to me. If it comes, like, great. That's like what's meant to come.
Yeah.
But I see the winter as more of a time to just be still and reflect.
Go inward.
Exactly.
It's your yin phase.
Yeah. I think it's why I've come to release albums in the spring. Because for me, that feels like the most natural time to be in a state of receiving. And I feel like the releasing of an album is like a state of constant receiving. Like we worked so hard on this project for like years and years. And now you're finally in a state where you can relax and be like, everyone can kind of hold you and be like, wow, I love this thing that you made.
Yeah.
And I want to celebrate it with you.
It's so interesting that you view putting out an album as receiving as opposed to giving. That's so interesting to me.
Maybe in the past I viewed it as giving.
Yeah. But what's changed about like how you view this process of like, I think most creatives or artists view putting something out as like, I'm giving you people this thing, but you actually view it as like, I'm actually receiving.
No, you're right. It is both, but I think it is more receiving than anything.
Yeah.
It's such an intense like moment of energy. That moment when you release something and suddenly thousands or millions of people are listening to it all at once. That is a divine and powerful moment.
Yeah.
To be harnessed. And I think in the past, I know in the past, I just started associating every act of work and promotion with this feeling of stress. Almost because I thought it made me, like, it made this image of me being a hard worker true. You know, like, the more stressed I was, the more overworked I was, the harder I was working and the more I deserved everything I was getting.
Right. Listen.
Which I think is a very common immigrant thing too, you know?
No, I think it's also like capitalism tells us that to be in a state of creation is to be in a state of like arduous, like maddening work as opposed to like ease.
Exactly.
How did you learn to create with ease as opposed to creating with like arduous, stoic?
I'm still learning how to create with ease. And I think it's like that's what I was saying. Like, I'm really not perfect. Like, I'm very perfectionist about these albums and really hard on myself and really like, okay, like if I made the song, like I kind of revel in it for maybe 2 weeks, but then if I get a new idea, I'm like, oh, but this could be better.
Yeah.
This could be better.
Yeah.
And I have trouble accepting that, like, the beauty of that moment in time.
Yeah.
Is like the beauty of that moment in time. And it's always funny looking back at songs in hindsight because you love them so much more. And you're like, oh, this reminds me of just like that memory or like that place in time, and you're not even like focused on all the arduous energy that went into it.
Right.
But I think, sorry, I'm getting a bit off tangent.
No, not at all.
But yeah, I think the way I manage and create with ease is finding synchronicity. Like, I have a daily practice of recognizing magic like a couple times a day and just writing it down. And I think that's led me to find a lot of ease lately, because it just reminds me that like the more in tune your vibration is with spirit, the more everything just starts naturally aligning. It's crazy because I spent like probably my most intense Vipassana this year was when I was at the most at ease. It was this July when I had taken a vacation for like 2-3 weeks off. I was meditating a ton. And I just remember starting to ask for things and really like letting go of the need to have it appear in that moment, just trusting that it would come. It would be as simple as like, can this little bird fly on my chair at this moment? And like I'd start to meditate so much, and then the moment I'd open my eyes, the bird would be there.
Oh, wow.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I started to practice like synchronicity and like seeing magic all around me. And this is where a lot of people are like, okay, that's completely delusional. You know? Like that stuff isn't real.
As I hear you talking about ease, and synchronicity and magic, the magic that comes about, what I'm really hearing you talk about is trust. And it's funny when you say this is a part of the podcast where people click out, because trust is not really something that we're encouraged to do. Like in a
or maybe
capitalist
even
society.
that's natural to our bodies.
Yeah.
Because of how much we've been through as a species.
Exactly.
You know?
And I think the reason that people click off when they hear anyone sort of talk about magic or like synchronicity, being a conscious creator of your own experience, I think the reason that people click off is because they're like, this bitch is asking me to trust in this world. And like oftentimes we talk about trusting others, which is a whole other conversation. But what I hear you talk about is like learning to trust yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm actually in a process right now of dealing with my own mental illness learning to trust myself.
How do you trust yourself?
Well, what I realize is that a lot of my anxiety and depression, but especially anxiety, is actually just a radical refusal to trust myself.
Wow.
I used to always feel like the opposite of anxiety is being calm, but really it's just trusting yourself. Like the opposite of anxiety is trusting yourself. And the way that I'm trying to practice trusting myself is through yoga, like just
I love that.
Specifically yin yoga, where I'm holding long poses for a long time and I'm learning to trust that I can handle it. And I'm also learning to trust that my body will tell me if it's too much.
Yeah.
Like learning to trust that I can discern between discomfort and pain. And
that's so beautiful.
Yeah. And in that, I learned to trust how to discern between what's for me and what's not. Like, is this discomfort bad for me, or is this discomfort actually strengthening me? So for me, I'm just in this era where I'm learning how to trust. And I feel like I'm realizing like, wait, you've been doing this. You're not new to this. You're true to this. Like, this has been your practice.
Yeah, but I think it's also recent, you know?
Yeah?
Yeah.
But how did you learn to like trust yourself enough to let go? You know? Because that process of like creating with ease it's really a trust that like I can let go and I'll be fine.
I think it's about the way that you talk to yourself. And like talking to yourself in a way where you say something and you just allow it to happen. Like sometimes I'll do this practice that's new to me at the airport because I fly a psychotic amount.
Yeah.
And I'll start to just tell myself, everyone I meet is really kind today. Everyone I meet is really helpful. Everyone at the airport is super kind.
Yeah.
And they're happy to see me. And I don't know if they actually feel that way. But what often happens is I tell myself those things and I have a really positive reaction a minute later. And probably because I'm also radiating the energy that like is welcoming. You know? And is not like, get me on this vibe.
Yeah.
Which I've been there. Like I've been super stressed about getting on a flight for forever. But like I just realized the more I talk to myself in little ways throughout the day, like this will go well. Like I'm actually I'm excited to see how this person will surprise me. And it always happens. If I stay on that wave, it usually always happens.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't happen, I notice that it's probably just a test of spirit.
Interesting. What is a test of spirit?
It's a really small example that I went through last night. Like, remember I told you I was really stressed about that dumb shit that I ordered?
The eBay. So last night, your eBay order was stressing you out. And that was spirit testing. Yeah.
I was stressed because it was going to like a random apartment building in New York that I had no control over. And it was really expensive.
Yeah.
And it was like just an order created by mistake. Anyways, it's not important.
Yeah.
But then I was like, wait, I have people who can help me with this.
Yeah.
Like, I need to start trusting that I have people on my side who are down to help me with these things. And I don't have to carry it all alone.
Yeah.
And I was like, let me just ask for help in this moment.
Yeah.
And then I finally let go of this shit after all day.
Yeah.
And immediately these song melodies and lyrics that I was looking for the song immediately came.
Wow.
And I just took it as a sign, like, wow, like I spent the entire day with my body like clenched up and anxious when I could have been enjoying, like, you know, I could have been enjoying the view. I could have been enjoying being alive. I could have been channeling a song.
Yeah.
And I could have asked for help. And instead, I chose to be stressed.
Yeah.
And the moment I let go is the moment, like, something I was searching for weeks is when it came.
Oh, wow.
So that's what I mean by, like, small tests of spirit.
Yeah.
And it's such a, like, mundane example.
Yeah.
It probably sounds so silly, you know?
Life is just a series of mundane examples.
Yeah.
Like, that's just like every day is just a series of mundanity, just banality.
No,
so
I know. It probably sounds
profound.
It probably sounds so boring.
No. So is this where you would say, like, where music finds you in this moment, in these, like, little banal moments where you're connected to spirit?
Yeah, where I finally let out a deep sigh after like dealing with real life all day.
It's funny because, as you know, I'm dating a musician. Yeah. Thanks to you, actually. You brought us together.
Crazy.
But I'm curious, like, what you think the state of the music industry is right now. And, like, why is that? Does it reflect sort of like something that spirit is trying to convey, or what's happening with music? What is the
state of the music industry?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
I love you looking at Dawn and being like, what is the state?
How much time do you have?
Jesus. I have to dissociate.
You have to dissociate to think about the state of music. I have to
simply dissociate in the state of music every day.
What's going on?
What is going on?
How did we get here?
It's in a bad place.
Yeah.
It's in a bad place. Okay. But it's also in a great place. Like, I'm not going to say there are not beautiful songs coming out and beautiful albums coming out every day.
Yeah.
There are. I just think that like I was saying, like, the internet is a flattening dimension. And I think that musicians' souls are so expansive. And what they're channeling is so expansive. Like, I really think that music is the closest to that, like, God kind of spirit.
Yes.
I think that musician and what they, like, channel is so expansive. It's so wide. I think it's like the closest art form to spirit. It's like the direct conduit, I think, of what it's trying to impart on us. And I think that when we try to keep flattening it and keep condensing it into shorter and shorter bits and more like less precious, musicians are tasked with channeling this great source. And I find that usually the musicians who are pretty good at that. And it's not all of them. Like, a lot of them are pretty extroverted. But I find, like, there's a very specific type of music and message that gets channeled to an introvert. And I don't think this time is really the time for introverts.
Talk about it. Talk that shit.
I think that, like, extroverts are kind of uplifted in this time.
Yeah.
People who can, like, talk directly in your eyes to a camera. And I don't think that's the problem. I just think that, like, it's not allowing for, like, a lot of different types of expression that have existed in the past, and like made space for the introverts, made space for the people who aren't marketing geniuses, and like, and can engineer, like, budgets and teams and like DIY concepts and like marketing moves out of their ass every single day. Because they're being asked to do that every single day. Like, that's insane. And with no resources. With getting like a cent per stream.
Less than that.
Actually, like a quarter of that. So it's like, when that isn't nurtured at like the minimum, I think that's why we're ending up with this like need for great introspective albums. It's really hard to come across them because it's just not being nurtured in the same ways. And like, even the whole thing is just tasked on the musician. The whole thing, top to bottom. Running the show, dealing with crazy logistics while touring. The entire thing is on your bank account.
And on you to do.
And on you to run, to promote. The entirety of marketing is on you. The entirety of like writing the album, because there's just less resources and like less people to help you with it, is pretty much on you. And like, where is the time to develop craft in that? Where is the time to even like commune with spirit, or the time to just be a human being or be at ease?
As a woman in music, you already have all this pressure to be a marketer, to be a PR person, to be a graphic designer, to be a
not a graphic designer.
You know, et cetera, et cetera.
Is crazy.
No,
but I've been there. I've literally been there.
You know, you're a songwriter. There's already, because of the devaluation of music, this pressure to be a million things at once. Does womanhood bring on additional pressures? Like the pressure to like be the face of femininity, the pressure to like hypersexualize yourself, because, you know, what sells? Sex. And if we're bundling music up as a commodity, you know, it does have to be sold with sex. And I feel like the burden of that is on the backs of like women musicians. Do you feel that burden?
I feel that burden so much. I never had one body issue before I was in the music industry.
I believe it. I
literally never thought about my body.
Wow.
Also because maybe I didn't have social media like that before I was a musician.
I'm sure.
So I literally never thought of my body.
I'm sure.
I was just like a bean floating around. I was like, I feel beautiful. And there's nothing wrong with me.
What is it? Is it an internal pressure or is it an external pressure? Do you feel like the fans put this pressure on you, the creative, to be this like embodiment of sex? Or do you feel like it's like the internal, like all of the women musicians
it's both,
are like putting pressure on each other to like out-feminize the other?
It's both, I think it's both. I think my fans are amazing, and like they're mostly gay women.
Woo!
That's probably like where it's at mostly. No, I have a pretty diverse audience, but I would say that a lot of them are like that. And you know, sometimes I do feel sexualized. It's really funny because I'll be having a great day in my body. And then I'll post a photo online and everyone will be like, wow, you're so brave. It's so...
Bitch! That is so... I will fuck up... I'm going in your comment section and I'm going to round them up. I'm gonna.
I'll be like,
that is so rude. Like you were just being.
no, like I thought I was like the hottest thing to walk this planet, and they're like, oh my god, you're so brave to show your natural body. You're so like, you just make me feel comfortable in myself.
Oh my god, hoes are rude. Hoes are rude. No, that's the rude.
No, but the thing
what
is,
you know, it's great. There's no male musician. Rick Ross will post his literal asshole on the Instagram feed, and no one will be like, "Wow, Rick, you're so brave."
I think they would. No,
like no,
that actually
like
seems a little brave.
like Flavor Flav could post anything on the internet. And no one is ever like, wow, yeah. Like men just don't have this pressure.
No, it's insane.
Or this expectation or this ideal to live up to.
My favorite thing you've ever said on this podcast was beauty is a project for women and it's endless.
Yeah.
And that until we die, we're always trying to revert back to maybe this one day when we were 26 and we looked like a god.
Yeah. In one angle.
In one angle.
Yeah.
Not from every angle.
Yes.
Not from every angle.
And your whole life is a project where you pursue that an angle.
Yes.
Like they make our lives very small.
It's very small. And
yeah.
I think a very liberating part about turning 30 has been
talk that shit.
29 felt like the waiting room, and I felt so scared because I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna age for the first time.
Yeah.
I'm gonna like have to start noticing changes in my body.
Yes, I felt that
like
too.
however minimal, it's gonna start happening. Like it's like you start feeling like the clock ticking down at 29.
Yeah.
And then at 30, even though I've only been here 3 months, it's like
it's lovely.
It's lovely here.
It's a lovely place.
Because you realize you're only getting farther from the standard.
Yeah, and that's so freeing.
It's so freeing.
Oh my god.
It's so freeing because you're like, oh, like, yeah.
Life is about other things.
Life is about other things.
Yeah, and like I need looking good for men.
It's so unserious to look good for men.
It's the most jobless shit you could do as a woman. It's an extremely jobless thing to do, to wake up in the morning and be like, I'm going to look good for men.
Looking good for men is insane.
It's insane. It's really, yeah. But no, I really completely agree with you. Like 29 is the waiting room.
29 is the waiting room.
I had a lot of anxiety 29 about aging. But then when I became
I think
30,
it's everyone.
Yeah.
I think it's everyone. At 29, you're like, fuck. Like,
yeah.
Because you're told, like, this is it as a woman.
Yeah. You're told, like, that's your expiration date.
That's the end of your career. That's like the end of your beauty, your value.
Yeah.
And I think when we start reclaiming that, let's reclaim being just not the standard.
Absolutely. Because also, don't you feel you're most beautiful?
Yeah, when I feel the most beautiful, I'm in the tropics. I'm in a bikini. I have no makeup on.
Yes.
And no one is looking at me.
Oh my, don't you love not being perceived?
Yeah, the only place I'm being perceived is trees.
Love it. We love being perceived by trees.
Yeah.
Gorgeous, gorgeous girls. That's what we love.
Gorgeous girls in the woods.
But being perceived by men, it's the trenches.
It's really interesting. I just find it funny that they have anything to say about my body.
Yeah.
It's very hilarious to me.
Yeah.
Or like anything to say about me, like aging or growing.
Yeah. So while listening to your album, I really got the sense, sort of mirroring what I said in the beginning of the episode, that this album feels like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly.
Yeah.
Like as I listen, I'm like, oh shit, this is what it's like to become a butterfly. But I feel like your album is about aging. Am I right in that assessment? And what are you trying to say about aging? Like what is your magnus opus? Your
I'm hardly aged. The thing is I'm really young. Yeah. So I can't say it's completely about that, but I can say that it's about maturing and getting like more at ease in in this 3D body every year that goes on.
I'm really glad we've stumbled upon the topic of aging. And the beauty that comes with it, because as I listen to your album, I feel like it is about aging, or rather maturing. Is my assessment right that your album is about maturing?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I started off with a different intention, but naturally I found that all the songs that stayed and the main theme was about just getting older and getting softer.
Yeah.
And like just reflecting on just how life can be very maddening.
Yeah.
But when you find like the love that makes your inner child feel alive, or when you find like the kind of daily practices that bring out that inner baby and nourish that, like that's kind of, I think, the best way to like grow up. And I think what we all need. And I think like the healthiest adults seem to only get softer over time.
Yeah.
Because they're like, yeah, it's either that or it's getting very hard as a person.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's either tending to yourself and taking care of yourself
and
taking care of your community, like falling in love with the earth, falling in love with what you're meant to do here, or hardening.
Yes.
Which is just not an option for me.
So to mature inherently is to insist on becoming softer. Yeah. Is that sort of like the central theme of the album? Because you have a song in there about Palestine.
Yeah. That's just one aspect for sure.
Yeah.
And I feel the song is about so many things. The album is about so many things.
What is it about? What would you say are like the central themes or like ideas in your album?
I would say the central theme is around getting older. But yeah, it's about everything. It's about falling in love with someone really deeply and like thinking about like settling down in marriage for the first time.
Yeah.
And that's like a big part about getting older. It's about thinking about having a baby.
Yeah.
You know, those kind of things.
Yeah.
It's about watching people, you know, you love die and contending with that and contending with how to communicate with them. That's how the album starts, is with Pluto, and it's about Pluto is really just like a poem about death.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are you saying about death?
Just that it kind of relates back to like this whole conversation of magic.
Yeah.
Just that like when we lose somebody, it's just a different way of communicating with them.
Oh, explain. What does that mean?
We've lost the ability to communicate maybe over text or like when we hug them and touch them, but we can still communicate with them all the time.
Yeah.
If we listen deeply enough when we're in nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this album is very much a love letter to nature in a lot of ways. A love letter to the sun.
Yeah. Why are you writing
a love letter to summer?
Yeah, why are you writing a love letter to nature specifically?
I think it's the place where, and I love that we're here.
Yeah, that's why we had to bring you to the birthplace of nature.
The birthplace of nature is here.
It's right here.
I believe it.
Yeah.
It's just a place like that I was describing, that like when you find that flow with music, it's the same thing. Like in nature, it just drops you right into that very centered and aligned place. And you don't even have to try hard. You just have to look. Yeah. So that's why I needed a whole love letter to nature in an album.
Are there any standout songs that you love the most?
I think my favorite songs right now are Pluto, Rise, We Should Move Somewhere Beautiful. We Should Move Somewhere Beautiful is about nature, yeah. Yeah. It's just about like the desire to leave the city and like live on a farm.
Yeah. Do you have that desire?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think I'm becoming just more like grounded in my body and realizing that I don't need to cling to some like idyllic dream of like where I belong. Like where I belong is
in your body.
Yeah, like with spirit in my body, and wherever that is, it's perfect.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
yeah, I think we get called for sure to different places at different times in our lives. But right now I feel called to living in a city and like nurturing the friendships I've learned.
Because I know when you were starting out in music, you lived in New York. How has moving to LA like changed your process of making music and just the music itself?
I actually moved deeper into the mountains with this album. Like when I started making this album, that's when I moved deeper in the mountains. And I'm not even sure if I live in proper LA now. I don't think I do.
Okay.
But yeah, just that experience of getting the privilege to be that like have that much access to nature while also being within a city is incredible.
Yeah.
It's like life-changing.
No, definitely.
I think LA is definitely what you make of it.
Yeah.
And the people that you find and the community that you find. Like you can't just go into it like just expecting it to be great on the first day.
Yeah.
It takes a long time.
It's a journey.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
And it's a worthwhile journey for me.
I've always wondered like how an album comes to be. Like where does it start and when does it, like how do you know like I'm starting an album? And then how do you know?
The album had a crazy genesis.
Yeah?
I'm remembering now.
Okay, what was it?
I met MIA in the jungle.
What?
Yeah, and that was like the week I started the album.
What did meeting MIA in the jungle?
Like literally in the middle of the forest.
Yeah.
And it was such deep synchronicity. Like I've always admired her work for a really long time.
Yeah.
And literally I was in like hours and hours into a forest in the middle of an island. It doesn't sound real.
I'm gonna ask you, why were you was this Jeffrey's Island? I'm kidding. So you're on Epstein's Island? No. I'm kidding.
Literally the Caribbean.
I'm kidding. So, but you're on the island in a forest.
On the island in a forest in a place where like no one stays. Like there's like
doing ayahuasca?
3-4 houses.
Yeah.
No, I was just like with my friends.
Aw.
Yeah, celebrating a birthday.
Yeah, okay.
And she's just there. Like in the lobby, like the one other person at this random ass B&B.
Oh my god.
And we struck up a really beautiful conversation, and then like it started pouring rain.
Yeah.
And I went down in the rain and like I just felt like just like a moment of magic. I was like, that was weird. Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
What a random way to meet someone you really admire.
Yeah, just in a forest.
Yeah. And then like 2 days later I went home and wrote I wrote down some lyrics in that moment.
Yeah.
That just came to me in that very like beautiful clearing moment. Yeah. And it was a very crazy time because like a week before I'd just gotten robbed of like 40K of equipment on tour. Like I was in the trenches.
Yeah.
I was in the trenches. I'd gotten really sick on tour. Like I was just very much going through it and going through a lot with just like how the album was being perceived as a brown person. There was a lot of like shit that I don't want to get into in this interview, but there was a lot of shit around the album that was really hard. And yeah, it was just like this turning point and this moment of synchronicity. And the song that is kind of like the genesis for the album now, it's called Every Color. I don't know if I'm going to put it on the final track list because when we're recording this interview is kind of like I'm at 80%.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't know if that song is going to be on it.
Yeah.
But it was the genesis of the album.
Wow.
And that song sounded like that rain that day and that moment of synchronicity.
Oh, wow.
And I realized that like that was a feeling I just needed to keep chasing.
Yeah.
And chasing over and over again.
That feeling of magic. Yeah, I
feeling of
do
magic.
hear like a lot of birds in your album. It sounds very outsidey. It's very live.
Yeah.
I really do hear and like feel that sense of like we're convening with nature right now.
I think like the specific element that I was going for was like morning rain. Like rain with sunlight pouring through it.
Yes.
So it's like creating all these prisms and rainbows around. And like it's
Yeah.
just that's like the most magical sight to me is morning rain.
Yeah. No, I definitely feel that coming through the album.
Yeah.
So when is it coming out? Where do we find it? Where do we find you?
I literally can't say in this interview.
Okay,
I
no
have no
worries.
idea.
Yeah.
It's probably gonna be a summer album.
Well, we could literally talk forever.
I know.
But for the sake of creating scarcity so that we can commodify this episode and sell it on the free market. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But we do have to wrap up, unfortunately. But this has been a really beautiful and stunning conversation.
It's been amazing.
I've learned so much.
I've learned so much.
Like we talked about music, we talked about God, we mostly
talked about God.
Yeah, we did. She's the main character.
She is the main character.
The
girls are in their religious era.
We're in our religious era, okay? We're done with atheism.
The girls are praying.
We're praying. We're doing yoga.
Yeah.
Okay. We're eating our leafy greens.
Yep.
We're going outside.
No, but like it's a distinction. It's even more than the green juice.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's praying.
Yeah. Yes. It's meditating.
No.
You know? But we talked about so much. We talked about beauty too.
We did talk about beauty.
And
that was an important one.
That was we needed to touch on that.
Yeah.
We do. We need every era we're gonna do. Our very first interview was like almost 10 years ago. Well,
no way.
Not 10. But every decade now we need to just do an interview.
I like that.
And document how we're aging.
Oh, I'm tired.
Yeah. So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. I've tired her out. I finished her. We've spiraled into oblivion. Let us know what you think of this episode. Chime in with your thoughts in the comment section below. And we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye. Thank you for coming. This was so beautiful.
This was amazing. I could keep going.
Yeah, no, same.